Hi, this is Sylvia Liska Durrell. Today I am sharing the story of my trip to the Button King Museum in Bishopville, South Carolina. Visiting the museum was something I had been wanting to do, so on our way to Ohio recently, a friend, his dog Tag, and I made our way to the legendary Dalton Stevens Museum. It is a bit off the highway, but not too hard to find with GPS. First we came upon this sign, which was just where we wanted to be. Looking down the road, we could see some buildings, which a little surprisingly turned out to be the museum property. Dalton opened it in 2008. The building was built by his children next to his home. There is no charge to visit the museum, just a donation jar. J.D. Stevens' dog alerted him that we were coming, and they both came out to open the museum for us. J.D. lives right there on the property in Bishopville and takes care of the museum since his dad passed away on November 21st, 2016. Tag was invited into the museum with his new friend. It was an amazing visual treat for this button lover. Upon entering, the first thing I saw was Dalton's denim jumpsuit, the first button-covered project he made. He sewed 16,333 buttons on it. It took him 2 years, and it weighed 16 pounds and 2 ounces. Dalton regarded his original button suit as his masterpiece. He thought the jumpsuit needed an appropriate pair of shoes, so he glued 517 buttons on a pair to go with it. And as you start to walk around, you see button-covered items and buttons everywhere. There was his guitar with 3,005 buttons. He used it to sing and perform with. Next, he covered a banjo. Dalton's extreme lack of sleep eventually brought television to him. As the Button Man and later the Button King, he appeared on Johnny Carson, David Letterman, Geraldo, Regis and Kathy Lee, and countless other shows. Dalton would cheerfully strum and sing for anyone who visited his museum. He'd wear a button outfit, strap on his banjo or guitar, and sing one of his self-penned button songs. I sew buttons, I don't chug a lug, smoke the weed or do no drugs. Buttons on my suit, banjo and guitar. My wife got upset when I started on my car. Next came his piano. Then he did his 1983 Chevy Chevette. It took 150,000 buttons. Insomnia became an asset. I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't stop, he said. I'd go 4 and 5 days and never go to bed. This is his hearse, which he covered with 600,000 buttons. The hearse was originally donated by a funeral home in town, and it was used in his funeral. So was the second of his 2 button coffins. The first one you'll see in the museum as proof of his coffin-enhancing skills. He damaged it when he accidentally locked himself in it, trying to take a nap. The story goes that one night, while encrusting a coffin in buttons, Dalton suddenly got tired. If I don't go to bed right when I get sleepy, it'll be another day or 2 before I can get to sleep, he explained. So Dalton crawled into the open coffin for a nap. Then I must have had a nightmare, bumped around, and the lid fell down and locked me in. Dalton spent 7 very long hours trapped in the coffin before his son stopped by the next morning on an unrelated errand and freed his dad. His son said to his dad, "What are you trying to do, get used to that thing?" Dalton replied, "You are the best son that anybody in the world could ever ask for." In his futile effort to open its lid, Dalton tore the coffin lining, so the local funeral home gave him the second coffin to cover with buttons, which was the one he was buried in. J.D. Stevens enjoys telling his dad's stories. He's a nice man. Here's Dalton's outhouse and toilet. And his bathtub. Along with local media, Dalton was on the Dave Letterman show 3 times. Charles Kuralt did an on-the-road segment about him and his museum. These are a couple of his promotional pieces. As you can see, Dalton Stevens made a relatively big name for himself as the Button King. But if you could have asked Mr. Stevens what made him known as the Button King, he'd have told you that it all goes back to one late night in Burbank, California. He said his first big break was an appearance as the Button King with the King of Late Night. Johnny Carson was the biggest I've ever been with and ever will, Stevens reportedly said. I will never get on another show as big as his one was. The date was March 19th, 1987. Dalton said it was the night that changed his life. I felt like I was talking to my best friend, said Stevens of Carson. He was just as nice as could be. Soon after his Tonight Show appearance, Dalton's career took off. I've done well after I was on that show, he said. I've been in a commercial. I've done well with that commercial. I wouldn't have got on if it hadn't been for people like Johnny Carson. You can still find videos of his performances on YouTube if you'd like to look. Just as a finishing note, I think it's interesting how he organized his buttons when he was creating something. It looks like by stacking different sizes on little finishing nails, it made it easier to find the size he wanted to glue on next. I hope you enjoyed my trip to the Button King Museum in Bishopville, South Carolina. Go there if you can. If you're a button lover, I think you'll enjoy it as much as I did.